Hey, gorgeous people. Happy Friday, October 31st. Happy Halloween. Happy spooky day to everybody who celebrates here in the heart of Scorpio season. Today, I have a very special guest, and we are going to be talking about the spooky Mercury Mars 5 conjunction cycle that is happening. It began in October this very month, and it is going to be continuing on through April of 2026. Mars and Mercury are going to conjoin 5 times. Whitney Kranz and I are going to break it all down. That's right, your favorite duo. We're back in action, baby, and we're here to talk about the Mars-Mercury cycle. Hello, Whitney. How are you doing today?
Alexandra, thank you so much for having me here. You know I'm great. Anytime I'm hanging with you, girl.
Seriously, I love hanging out with you, and we love recording stuff together. Whitney and I were looking over the astrology of November and October, and Whitney actually noticed this lineup that was coming down the pipeline where Mars and Mercury had some special stuff going on, and it jogged your memory back to those sextiles that we had over the summer when Mercury was retrograding in Leo. And that's actually kind of how we even got into all of this, was just Whitney pulling this little thread saying, hey, that's kind of interesting. These angles remind me of something. And we ended up falling down a pretty deep rabbit hole.
And a rabbit hole it was. But, I was thinking about those August sextiles we had, 2 sextiles from Mercury to Mars. And it happened because of Mercury's retrograde at that point, right? And so I was thinking back to that time and how typically I don't feel a sextile, but because we had 2 right in a row, there was some extra symbolism there. And you're right, it got us down this whole path to 5 conjunctions that occur in 2025 to 2026.
We're going to look at the conjunctions in a minute, but the conjunction in traditional astrology and Hellenistic astrology, it's technically not considered an aspect at all. It's actually referred to in ancient texts as a bodily union. So obviously that is literally like a conjoining, a physical conjoining of 2 different planets and their symbolism, which if we think about how much of ancient astrology was predicated on archetypal symbolism and mythologies, we can imagine those gods are having sex all the time, and so are the planetary gods in the sky. That's kind of what's going on here, right?
Exactly.
What a
And
lead in for you.
I know, I'm
Talk
like,
about the
God,
planets fucking, Whitney.
God's having sex in the sky. Let's do it. We're doing the
We're
God's
on my
work
channel
today.
now. Okay.
What a breath of fresh air, let me tell you. And you're right. It is so a blending of the significations. And just when 2 forms come together, they can be of equal quality, or one can be more dominant versus the other submissive, right? And it all depends on the dignity of those planets conjoining. When we look at the way these planets conjoin, there are different points in that cycle where one is pulling a little bit of dominance over the other.
Over this series, Mars is very, very strong. 3 of the 5 happen with Mars in dignity. The other 2 happen with Mercury in detriment. So
Right.
it is like an incredibly important thing to consider. We're going to look at each of these conjunctions and we're going to show you a list of them. But I just wanted to say that a lot of the ways that we think in a modern context about planetary cycles, so we're talking about Mercury and Mars, is really colored by astrologer Dane Rudhyar's work, likening these planetary cycles to the waxing and waning cycles of the sun and the moon.
Symbolically, when we talk about that cycle, if we go back to Rudhyar's theory, a new moon is a seeding point, right? And the opening square is the growth of that seed. And the opposition is the blossoming. And the closing
Yeah.
is the shedding, right? So
Yeah. The
that's
innuendo got worse. I'm so sorry. It did get worse. It is going to get better.
it'll need to.
Yeah. We're looking at 5 seeding points in a row. The cycle that we're beginning with today began on October 20th, just a few days ago, and it started when Mercury and Mars conjoined at 19 degrees of Scorpio. Now I'm going to show you a list, and I'm just going to read through these other conjunctions because Mercury and Mars will conjoin again on November 12th at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. Mercury will be retrograde and in detriment. Then Mercury and Mars will conjoin again at 26 degrees of Capricorn on January 18th. Mars will be exalted in Capricorn. Mercury and Mars will conjoin again at 10 degrees Pisces on March 15th. Mercury, once again, retrograde in detriment in its fall as well in Pisces. And then finally, Mercury and Mars will conjoin at 8 degrees of Aries on April 20th, and Mars will actually be in its domicile of Aries. So this is a pretty heady 5 conjunction situation that's happening here. 3 of the 5 feature Mars in dignity, and the 2 where Mars is sort of in a neutral sign where it has no dignity or debility, Mercury is retrograde and in detriment or fall.
Oh, we can obviously see that Mars really has, we'll just say, the upper hand. Use Mars lingo here in this metaphor, because Mars in this entire period has the upper hand, is definitely exerting more dominance and more force of will, and is pulling Mercury along into these lessons, maybe trying to help bolster Mercury's strength.
I think that's a really good point, because the conjunction as a blending, really Mars is helping dignify Mercury. That's how we think about planetary dignities. When ruler Mars is in a sign, it is adding dignity to every other planet in that sign because it is acting kind of as a host. This is the first of those conjunctions. And as you can see, Mars and Mercury are together in late Scorpio. This one kind of also coincided with the jewel theft from the Louvre, which I think was such a good entry point for this. It was so sneaky. It was so thorough. It was so considered. It was so nocturnal and scheming.
The cunning will to go snatch these jewels, right? And you call it, my friend, because on your week ahead episode that week, you said some people are getting away with some shit. You did. You got it right.
I saw another funny entry point to this Mars and Scorpio because somebody posted just as a meme joke online, but they were like, hey, if Taylor Swift said she would release new music, if the jewels were found, those jewels would be found within a week. And I think that's such a good entry point into her audience because she also has Mars and Scorpio. It's like the bloodhounds. It's like those two are so detail oriented. They're so thorough. I think it was actually kind of a beautiful but very intense little conjunction.
One of the concepts that I talked about, this similar to that sort of bloodhound aspect, whereas like special forces, right? It's the tactical unit
Totally
coming in to dig up some dirt.
The fact that this conjunction is the one that kicks off the cycle kind of tips us off to the way that the rest of these conjunctions are going to feel. Obviously, Scorpios are intense. Is that breaking news to anyone? This happening in Scorpio is
Hell no.
intense. Yeah. But I think Mars stays dignified. I don't think that Mars gets any less intense. It might get less nocturnal and it might be different in its expression. But it was really reminding me of this book, The 48 Laws of Power. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book. I feel like a walking red flag carrying this book around, but it feels like such a good read. And I posted about this on my Instagram. I had multiple astrologers reach out and be like, this is the perfect time to be reading that book because it's essentially exploration of the laws of power, which are things that the author has determined are principles of exercising one's will. Sound familiar? And he tells different sociological stories throughout time of ways that people have used these principles and different ways that they can be reversed and used. And I have to tell you, I made it into chapter 5 and I was Googling the natal charts of every person who is quoted or used in a story. And they literally all have Scorpio placements. All of them.
Scorpios, we love you. But there is an aspect to Scorpio that can sometimes, because of their cunning, because of how well they are able to be sneaky, there can be a manipulative quality sometimes that would be the shadow quality of a shadow quality of Scorpio.
Well, let's not even call it a shadow quality because there are plenty of productive and noble reasons to manipulate people.
I think it's so funny because my sweet little Cancer rising grand Earth trine husband got that book for Christmas last year. It was on his list. He was so excited. He got it. He cracked one page. He's like, oh, I can't read this. This is not for me.
Right, right. See, I, on the other hand, have Pluto conjunct my MC in Scorpio, and I was kind of like, I know all of this. I'm well aware.
Exactly. Yes.
I know your partner has Mars in Capricorn, so that kind of emphasizes how different Mars is in Scorpio than other places of its dignity. And the reason that this book really was speaking to me throughout the cycle, too, is because a lot of what it talks about is proximity to power. It really emphasizes people who are not kings necessarily. There are stories like that in here, too, but it's the people who are scheming or who are, like you said, manipulating, court politicking, the intrigue, it pulling the strings behind the scenes. Obviously, an obvious reference point would be Game of Thrones, or in some of the subplots of Lord of the Rings, there are, schemers and stuff going on. That is where I feel Mercury comes in, right? Because Mars has undiluted willpower in all of these conjunctions. Mercury really speaks to that proximity to power that we feel and see in this book.
And when you say king, I think we can think of several fire signs, but I'm thinking of the way that this conjunction cycle transitions from Scorpio, this place of darkness, into Aries, this place of the light. Aries can be an incredibly regal sign. There's a way that it's almost like a rebirthing moment for the planets themselves and for Mercury, I think, who is going through this process with not all the tools that he's used to holding, right? So it's this process of discovering or unearthing as we move from the darkness all the way into the light.
Yeah, brilliant point, Whitney. And echoed by the fact that this cycle ends with Mercury and Mars conjoining at 8 degrees Aries in the spring, which of course is the site of the last solar eclipse in Aries that we had on March 29th, 2025. So 100% that is what is being emphasized here. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the Mars-Mercury conjunction that happened in Scorpio. Let's look at this one here that happens right after Mercury stations retrograde at 6 degrees Sagittarius. Mars will overtake Mercury and kind of move ahead of Mercury in the cycle. What are your feelings and thoughts about this one, Whitney? I almost called you Mercury.
I love it. He's my dude. I think that this particular conjunction in Sagittarius, especially with Mercury in his detriment, Mars stronger here, could really go a couple of different ways, but it's giving like brawn over brains, right? There's this aspect of strength that is coming through to supersede intellect, right? Or we could just say effort over intellect or intelligence.
When we think about dignity and we think about Mercury and Sagittarius, we scream to ourselves that Mercury is in detriment, that Mercury is weak. But I think this is kind of bringing up for me this reference point of Mercury and Hermes representing us as the magician. And so our grip on the absolute finer details of reality doesn't necessarily need to be ironed out. We don't necessarily need to have an iron grip on what is real. If our willpower is strong enough, it can create alchemy. That's kind of what I'm seeing here. Mars in this sign of belief and vision. Sagittarius, that Mars is strong. It's hosting the sun and it's hosting Venus. And that Mercury, I feel, is along for the ride. When we think about a weak Mercury, it doesn't necessarily mean damaged or unable to do anything special or of value. People with Mercury in Pisces and Sagittarius, for example, are some of the brightest people in their field. But this is kind of alchemical here. There's no doubt for me that Mars is in the stronger position. And it's like Mars is the high priest directing his will. And it feels like Mercury is bending the rules of reality a little bit to sort of adhere to that.
I love that picture you paint. What strikes me is that having this Mars in Sagittarius myself, I understand this quality to Mars in Sagittarius that's a little bit like, fuck it. That's a little bit like either let's go, let's just get out of here, or let's chase those beliefs even further, even stronger, right? But there's something here that feels just a little bit nihilistic that might say, while Mercury is turning back retrograde, oh, why do we even need a solution when we've got, the magician in front of us, or when we've got this priest in front of us? The priest can make the magic, right? And so there's this little bit of like, well, I don't know. Fuck it. Let's just go with what the priest says.
Oh, I love that so much. It's a little bit of the fuck around, find out energy.
Yes, 100%.
Now, this next one I'm really excited about. It's happening on January 18th, and it will actually happen in Capricorn with an exalted Mars. Mars and Mercury conjoin at 26. It is the day of a new moon in Capricorn, and that new moon does occur at Mars's degree of exaltation, which is 28 degrees Capricorn. And Mercury and Mars are only 2 degrees off. So once again, they are right in the middle of things. Once again, we see this concept of proximity to power with Mercury and Mars. And we've got Venus applying to conjoin Pluto as well.
I am obsessed with this particular conjunction. I think it's so interesting that if we look at the last several months here in this time, that we had Mercury conjunct a new moon in Scorpio, and we have Mercury conjunct a new moon in Cap now with Mars, speaking to this cycle that's at play here. Also, this is a beautiful little kind of wedge we've got going on here with all of this trining Uranus at the same time. They're both sextiling Saturn and Neptune, and it feels really, really strong, really, really potent.
This is just one of the sexiest little lineups I've ever seen in my life. Granted, I am a Capricorn rising, but this is hot shit to me. And we'll probably do another video just about this on this channel.
Get the job done. We've got our best laid plans. Let's go. We're prepared. We can persevere. I mean, we are ready to climb that Capricornian mountain.
For sure. This is building. There's no way around that in my mind. Capricorn is so oriented around building things, systems, physical things, physical structures. It's such a craftsman area of the zodiac. And to have that support and witness by degree from ruler Saturn, from Uranus in Taurus, and then even the witness from Jupiter across in Cancer. Now, I think that that's kind of the most interesting part of all of this to me, is that Jupiter is across the way in Cancer. So there is reception because it is aspecting the moon and it's in the moon's sign. Not mutual reception, just one way. But many people, clients, friends, people in bars who I cast charts for have told me that Jupiter in Cancer has not felt the way that they thought it would. They're like, this hasn't been all sweetness and sunshine and moonshine. I think this is one of those moments where if Jupiter in Cancer has been complicated for you and it's been a crisis of faith and it's brought up your values around that Cancer part of your chart, there are some events happening here at this one in Capricorn that are going to be something really generative that's tug of war pulling us out of that.
I love it. I can't wait.
Same. I fucking can't wait, girl. I need this. All right, this next conjunction happens on March 15th. And this one, again, we have Mercury retrograding through the sign of its detriment and fall, Pisces, and conjoining Mars at 10 degrees of Pisces. At the same time, for this conjunction, we have the moon with Pluto, and we also have Venus conjunct Saturn in Mars' sign of Aries.
Not only is this happening conjunct the North Node, which is feeling like an important, shall we say, destiny point, but obviously as the point of eclipses, right? This is part of what turns the wheel in our life. I also can't help but notice that we're in Venus's bound here in the sign of Venus's exaltation. Venus is holding some weight over this particular conjunction, which, while Mercury is retrograde in its detriment, is at least lending a little bit of sweetness to the picture. We will talk about those few degrees of Aries when we review the next one. But this has been such a hot point of the zodiac over the last year, right? Because not only did we have that eclipse, but this was the station point of both Mercury and Venus's retrogrades in 2025. And so I feel like there's an interesting callback here, an interesting sort of weaving of the cosmic tapestry that's happening with these planets positioned here.
It almost just feels like the dominoes have settled and power has changed hands a little bit and different tactics are being used. Mars is receiving this trine from Jupiter within 5 degrees, and Jupiter is ruling the sign that Mars and Mercury and the Sun are currently in of Pisces. Now, Mars and Jupiter together, to me, look and feel like a gas pedal. They are a gas pedal. So, what does it mean when Jupiter is in the soft, nurturing, nocturnal moon sign of Cancer and Mars is in the soft, empathetic, watery, vaporous sign of Pisces? Some of that interpersonal positioning, taking some steps back away from that Aries, expressive, explosive part of us to make some headway in these softer halls of power, right? In a more embodied, maybe, place.
It feels like a really profound deepening of spirit, right? With that, when you put the pedal to the metal in these sort of more liminal places, it feels like some beautiful otherworldly connections we can make inside of ourselves.
Last but certainly not least, on April 20th, we actually have the final of these 5 conjunctions with Mercury and Mars conjoining, also conjunct Saturn at 8 degrees of Aries. Now, this is a time that I have been looking at for ages. This is one of those days where all the timelines converge. It's like you're watching a really complex movie with a bunch of subplots, and there's that one scene where all the people walk through Grand Central Terminal and like all 6 storylines go together. That's how this feels, because right after this happens, we have Venus conjoining Uranus at 29 Taurus, and we have the moon coming in to apply to Jupiter in Cancer. But obviously, the thing that's drawing my eye is this Mars, Saturn, Mercury conjunction. The last time Mars and Saturn came together was also right around the eclipse that happened in Mars' sign of Aries. Mars and Saturn conjoined in Pisces. So this is a pretty heavy, powerful conjunction. We might get really comfortable and used to a weak Saturn in Aries, a Saturn that doesn't have a strong voice to give us karmic work and to give us friction and boundaries in our life. But while Mars is still in that sign, it is dignifying Saturn. So this is just a strong, heavy ending to the cycle. And it feels like Mars and Saturn are just laying down absolute concrete masonry brickwork right here in the Aries part of the chart.
There is nothing chill about this. It is loud. It's funny you talk about laying down the concrete work. When Mercury has been retrograde several times throughout this conjunction cycle, that has been kind of feeling some trepidation about the plans that have been laid out, right? But now, here, when they are both conjunct Saturn in Aries, Mercury understands and has brought the big guns, right? It's like bringing in the heavy machinery to do that construction work, to lay those foundations, and really muscling through what this transition is.
I think what I'll title this episode is Proximity to Power, because I feel like that's what we're talking about here. And we're charting from the nocturnal and the sort of like undersided and reserved and icy cold deep waters of Scorpio. And then we're going through these other stages. Mars goes into Sagittarius, where it's all about belief and vision. Mars goes into exaltation in Capricorn, but that's really more about strategy when Mars is in Capricorn. In Pisces, Mars has, this empathetic, gaseous approach that we've talked about that's like a little more interpersonal and maybe even aloof in the Piscean way. But then when Mars comes into Aries, it is its most expressive. It is the closest we get to the I am, to the I think, therefore I say, I think, therefore I do. And so in our journey of Mars and Mercury, we come into the place of the most explicit kind of power. There's something being activated around this date that is initiatory and frankly kind of cardinal.
I'm seeing this as like a skeleton key moment, right? It's the skeleton key to power. All of a sudden, we have the key, we have the combo that opens the lock, that opens the door, and the pieces are sliding together.
Mars is my time lord. I hope for my sake that that's true. Whitney, we have looked in depth at all 5 of these conjunctions with Mercury and Mars from now till next April. Any parting words of wisdom for people who maybe have Mars or Mercury as a time lord, or they have sensitive natal placements around where some of these conjunctions are going to happen?
Well, I speak to both you and myself and the others in the audience, right? I've got Mercury as my time lord this year.
And I've got Mars.
And so it is quite the combination, right? Where strategy and power come together. And I think the best thing that we can do for ourselves at this time, as an astrologer, my approach is all about reflection and integration in order to move through these times. I think there's a way in which we can tap into the sort of mercurial quality of journaling. That's what I'm going to say, to really help us move through these. And to that point, track these. That's why I like to journal, because you better believe on November 12th, I'm going to be looking back at October 20th. And on January 18th, I'm going to be doing the same thing, because when we can help tie those lines together, it helps us understand, move through, and integrate the astrology.
To Whitney's point, so much of astrology is just journaling. And that is just a catchphrase of my channel at this point, because that is what this art form is at its best, is pattern recognition. It's reading the omens, and it's really hard to try to read the omens if you're not writing them down anywhere. A clay tablet will do. A little note in your iPhone will do. A papyrus scroll will do. Just try to jot some things down. Go ahead and leave Whitney and I a comment. Which of these conjunctions is going to be happening near one of your natal planets? Or maybe if Mars or Mercury is your time lord, let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me, Whitney. This has been really fun. I appreciate your gorgeous mind and all of your insights. Where can people find you if they want to link up?
Oh, thank you so much. This has been the best. You can find me here on YouTube. My handle is at astro.arcana.astrology. I have a podcast there called The House of Good Spirit, where I dissect every single lunation, each full moon and new moon, in order to help us grow along and integrate with it. You can also find me on Instagram at the same handle, and you can book a reading with me at astroarcana.com. Thank you so much.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Stay safe, and I will see you next Monday.